Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing WreckFest on the GeForce GTX 750 Ti. For performance monitoring, I'll be using CAM. If you want to download the software, there's a link down in the description. So WreckFest, I'll be doing 1080p, 900p and 720p. To skip those sections of the video, check the timestamps down in the description. So first of all, I need to talk to you about something very important about performance. What I did with this game in the tests, after changing the options, the resolution or anything in the options menu, I restarted the PC and then I started recording once I got into the race. That's because this game, after repeating the same track, runs a lot better. The first time you load one of the stages, by first time I mean after a restart or something like that, the game runs significantly worse. As an example, on the video on the 1050 Ti on 1080p max settings, the first time you run the stage it starts at 40 frames per second, then stabilizes close to 60 using the maximum settings. Once you finish the race and I don't know, maybe restart the race or something like that, the game can be over 50 frames per second all the time without any of those major drops into the 40s, so be aware of that. Each time I changed the settings, I restarted the PC, so it's as accurate as possible, but the more you play it starts running better. Okay, with that out of the way, I did first 1080p using the maximum settings, excepting the texture quality, which I kept on low. Anything over low is more than 2 gigs of VRAM usage, so stay on low if you're doing 1080p, and well, you'll be over 30 frames per second just fine for what I could see in this game. But there are very annoying drops in the frame rate, especially when you're crashing against other cars. So the moment you see a lot of effects on screen due to cars crashing between each other or against the sides of the track, means a big hit to the frame rate. Keep in mind that on 1080p I overclocked the GTX 750 Ti, on 900p and 720p the overclock is completely disabled. And if you watch my previous video on the 1050 Ti with this game, you'll notice that there is very similar performance in some of the resolutions, weirdly enough, but I saw a huge performance difference outside of the first part. So when the race just launches, it's almost the same performance, but when the cars get more separated or a lot of effects show up, the GTX 1050 Ti has better frame rates. So compared to this, when there are a lot of effects on screen, the hit to the frame rate is not as big as on the 750 Ti, obviously. So yeah, that's good news for people with the 750 Ti. Not sure what's up with the performance on this game, it's kinda weird. But overall, you can have a very good experience with this game, even with this GPU. I just recommend locking the frame rate to 30 or 60, depending on what you are targeting, because it can be very inconsistent due to the impact the effect quality has on performance. Just look at it like this: you're like at 60 frames per second or 70, you crash against another car or there's a big accident in the race, you drop from 60 to 70 to 40 frames per second in just a split second, then go back up to 60. That feels very weird when you're controlling the car. Then on 900p I did the same thing as on 1080p. I show you the maximum settings except in textures, which are on low. Then I lower the settings to around medium in order to try and get 60 frames per second the big majority of the time. And finally at 720p I max it out once again, but this time around, due to the lower resolution, I was able to use textures on medium instead of low, since it doesn't use as much VRAM due to the lower resolution. And again, most of the time we're at 60 frames per second, except at the very start of the race, a lot of cars very close together. At that point we're not exactly at 60 frames per second, but the big majority of the race it's at 60, so I didn't take that as a big deal, and that will be about it. The worst performance I saw so far was one of those city areas. On my end, that was the worst performance on the game. Usually trees plus grass, all that kind of stuff, and long draw distances are what destroys performance here. All that, including all the opponents on screen, maybe some collisions between them, this will be the worst case scenario. There are some stages that are way smaller when you have those demolition game modes where the objective is just to destroy other cars. Those are not even close as demanding as the rest of the events, like for example racing like I'm doing in this video. So in those game modes where it's just destroying other cars, you can expect much higher frame rates. And the first things that you should lower in the options menu to get better performance are basically shadows and grass. That is the fastest way to get better performance. Then if you're willing to restart the game, just lower reflections and effects a little bit. And other than that, there is not much else that you can do. Also, this game uses a lot of VRAM. If you have a 3 gig card, use medium. If you have more than 3 gigs, use high. And if you have less than 3 gigs of VRAM, use low. But yeah, that's pretty much the options menu. You also have MSAA if you want to use it. It's usually very demanding on the GPU, but at least we have the option if we want to. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.